Alright, so I stumbled across this 1-minute video trying to explain the Cuban Revolution, and it's wild how much history you can get wrong in just 60 seconds. Let's take a look and get right into it.
The Cuban Revolution explained in about a minute. Basically, you got Cuba. There was an emerging democracy there. Then there was a coup by Fulgencio Batista.
Wow, so only 4 seconds in and he's already spewing pure garbage. Emerging democracy? Does he actually believe that? Well, then I guess democracy is when over 70% of the country's arable land is owned by foreign agriculture giants, turning the entire nation into a giant plantation for outside investors. I guess democracy is when the capital city is turned into a gangster-run cesspool of vice, letting the American mafia run the rackets, while corrupt politicians line their pockets with a quarter of the national budget. See, that's what these fake historians aren't understanding. They want you to think Cuba was this pristine, flourishing utopia until Batista ruined it in 1952. That's nonsense. Long before the coup, this so-called democracy was already rotted and corrupt from the inside out. You can hold all the fake elections you want, but if your entire economic system is engineered around the complete extraction of wealth to Wall Street, you don't have an emerging democracy. You have a banana republic. Right after the US took Cuba from Spain, they didn't just pack up and leave. They installed a puppet government and forced the Platt Amendment directly into the Cuban Constitution. And what that did was give the United States the legal right to invade Cuba whenever they felt like it. On top of that, they used that exact same rule to force Cuba to hand over Guantanamo Bay, a permanent military base planted on their soil that is still there to this day.
And he was a dictator. He wasn't a great guy.
He wasn't just not a very good guy. Batista was protecting a system that overwhelmingly benefited American corporate interests.
En una época donde se defendía desde ese gobierno de Batista dictatorial los intereses del gobierno de los Estados Unidos. Por lo tanto, había mucho vínculo con la mafia norteamericana y con los intereses de las principales compañías norteamericanas que prácticamente eran las dueñas de Cuba. Las tierras, la generación eléctrica, los principales servicios, el níquel, la extracción minera, casi todas las actividades económicas estaban en manos del consorcio norteamericano.
There was a very small guerrilla movement started by Fidel Castro. And in the beginning, he was not a communist leader. No, he was just a guy who was saying he wanted independence for his country, and we didn't really know what that meant. Now, Bautista was not a very good guy. He was doing a lot of bad stuff, and the United States decided to just stay out of it, see what would happen, because it wasn't guaranteed at the time that this dude was a full-blown commie.
No, they didn't just watch from the sidelines. At first, they supported Batista with weapons and money. Then they pulled back once it became obvious he was a liability and was losing grip on the country. Even then, they didn't just passively step aside. The CIA and State Department spent the final months of the revolution trying to engineer a third force alternative that could take power before Castro did. The problem was that nobody else had any real popular support. Castro's movement did, and that's why the whole thing slipped out of Washington's hands.
In the end, the Barbudos, the bearded ones, ended up taking over Cuba. And then they started doing a lot of horrible, horrible things.
Oh yeah, terrible things. Land reform. Launched a nationwide literacy campaign. Built hospitals. Built schools. Nationalized foreign-owned industries. Real monsters. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it.
I don't get political on this channel, but the one thing I care about is freedom. Anybody who tries to take away freedom or do horrible things against normal people is terrible in my book. I do not want totalitarianism or dictatorships. I want freedom. And these guys, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, did a lot of terrible, terrible things. This included executions. This included camps.
The men executed in '59 were high-ranking officers, torturers, and secret police from the Batista regime. These were convicted war criminals who spent years brutalizing Cuban citizens to keep the dictatorship alive. After the revolutionaries took power, these officers were put on trial where evidence was presented and they were found guilty. The socialist government carried out the will of the people who, after years of tyranny and repression, wanted justice. There were even massive rallies with hundreds of thousands of people demanding the harshest possible punishment for members of the old regime. And even when the tribunals handed down lighter sentences, people literally went on strike because they thought the new government was being way too soft on those responsible.
As well as in the 1960s, they would actually capture people off the street, as well as people who were going to go for execution or in prison. They would forcibly remove their blood. Yep, that happened. They were vampires. They took a bunch of their blood and then they would execute them and then sell that blood on the black market.
The vampire story he's referencing comes from a Washington-funded, Miami-based lobby group report where they unironically claim that Cuba was draining 7 pints of blood from every prisoner to sell to Vietnam. So let's take a look at this logistically. The average human body only holds about 10 pints of blood. Lose 3 to 4 pints, and you're already in severe hemorrhagic shock. Your organs are beginning to fail. So, draining 7 puts you way past that. You'd be dying before they ever got you out of the room. That story is physiologically impossible.
There's a lot of discussion about whether or not Cuba is going to get invaded by the United States in the coming future. I have no idea about that. But what I will say is the communist government of Cuba is the worst thing to happen in the entirety of the Americas.
For a guy who runs a history channel, that is a pretty wild claim to make. But considering the centuries of slavery, the ethnic cleansing, and the other atrocities committed by the US and their proxies, not only is this historically illiterate, it's tone deaf. Maybe learn to read the room, dude.
I don't care what political belief you support. What I support is freedom. The more freedom, the better.
Notice how he's been doing this for the entire video? Every single time he gets ready to say something completely ridiculous, he immediately reaches for his get out of jail free card. I don't care what political belief you support. What I support is freedom. That's a nice little trick, actually, because he gets to spend the entire video pushing a highly biased interpretation of history, and then he throws up his hands and goes, "Hey, don't look at me, guys. I'm just the unproblematic, wholesome Chungus history guy. I just like freedom." Because apparently, if you say I just like freedom first, nobody's allowed to question anything that comes out of your mouth afterwards. It doesn't work that way. You spent the entire video making political arguments. So own them. Quit being a coward and own them.
Whether it's people like Castro or Pinochet on either side of the aisle, I am not a fan of anybody who takes away freedom.
And then he tries to cop out one last time by saying Pinochet and Castro are both bad. No. I'm not letting you sneak that one by. Pinochet was a CIA-backed dictator who came to power through a bloody military coup. Castro spent half his life surviving CIA assassination attempts. So those are not even remotely the same thing. You don't get to lump everyone you don't like into one giant pile and call that historical analysis. That's not analysis. It's lazy. Honestly, I don't know what's worse. The fact that I was able to make an entire video breaking down how much you got wrong in just 90 seconds, or the fact that somebody is going to watch those same 90 seconds, walk away, and genuinely believe they learned history. That's why this pop history slop is so dangerous, because you don't even have to know what you're talking about. You just have to sound confident enough. Anyway, guys, that's all I got. Stay sovereign.